In today's episode, I'm joined by Ben Towers. Described by Richard Branson as one of the most exciting young entrepreneurs, Ben's journey began at the age of 11, when a family friend asked him to help build their company's website. With no experience, Ben taught himself the craft by watching YouTube videos. Fast track to now, Ben is the co-founder of Tahora, an employee engagement app that recently raised $1.5 million and won a place on Y Combinator, which is essentially the Harvard of tech accelerator programs. So, introducing Ben Towers.
For me, I feel like mentoring doesn't work well if it's super structured, because I think in reality, entrepreneurship isn't structured. That's the whole thing about being an entrepreneur compared to working at a corporate. But I think the principle of having great people around you can call is really valuable.
Mr. Ben Towers, how you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started your first website aged 11. You then started a business aged 13. And by the time you were 18, you had scaled that business up to 26 people whilst you were still at school, A-levels, a full shebang, and then you sold that business.
Yeah, so I think when I was at 11, the word business was nothing to me. It was purely just making money from my bedroom. And I was at 13, I realized, actually this could be something and could actually be a potential career out of this. So that led to me sort of starting it as an official business, telling HMRC, going through the process of all of that. And then after that, then really growing the company from that point. And then about 16, I'd say, it got serious when we started to change from web to marketing, and we started to get some really big government contracts and so on. And that sort of 2 years, it scaled really quickly.
I just think that's so wild. Have you lost sight of, how big that was for a 13-year-old to be doing that, have the initiative to start a business at 16 to kind of make that transition? Does that all feel very mundane and normal to you?
I think it feels normal now because that's like 10 years ago now. Mm-hmm. So I'm 23 now. So I feel like it feels normal because of the amount of time it's been. But in reality, like on reflection, I do realize that I think to a certain extent that's quite unheard of. But also if you look at the next generation coming through, I'm also not surprised. Like even if you take it out of context and you say, okay, on Minecraft or any of these games and so on, reality is they're building servers, they're creating environments and so on. So actually doing a lot of the same sort of principles that I was doing, but just in a new form.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so we've spoken before about, the exit. And I think with an entrepreneurship, people exit a business and that's seen as a huge moment. A lot of the time, it wasn't actually a good exit. Whereas from our conversations, I understand that it was a legitimate exit. Mm-hmm. This made you money. That was a really big and successful move.
Yeah, I think marketing exits are not as attractive as like tech exits or anything like that. So you see, how these X multipliers and so on online. In reality, a marketing exit is more of like an acquisition of the assets you have than an IP point of view, because your IP is your workforce and your clients, which can both leave very quickly. So that I'd say means that it's not maybe as gold plated as what you would see, for example, like tech startups who scale and sell to VCs and so on. But I think for me, the main reason why I wanted to do it was actually because I wanted to do something else. And I think probably from starting at such a young age, I was almost bored of it, in the sense of I'd done it for such a long time. It'd been my childhood. I'd almost ready to turn over a new leaf and go now and do something else. So in reality, was I thinking that at the time? Not really, but I think on reflection, I realised subconsciously that's what was going through my mind.
That's really interesting. Do you remember any particular big moments or stories from that time? Do you remember where you were, how you felt, and also what the people around you were doing?
Some big moments. I mean, media-wise, there was so the Times published this list, and they called it the most powerful teenagers on the planet. And I was at the top of that, and I was 17 at the time, but I didn't know about it. Like, they hadn't contacted me before. There was no sort of arrangement or anything like that. And it literally happened on that following Monday. So the day after it came out, a friend of mine who actually did a TV show like a couple of weeks before said, "Oh, well done on the Times article." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I remember sort of going back and forth on WhatsApp with him and then realizing that had come out. So I think there are times like that where it's an amazing achievement, but like I almost didn't get a chance to think, wow, this is coming out, because it almost happened afterwards. But I mean, obviously that moment, I think for my family was a big moment, because that's where something that they're used to, which is the paper, the news, recognizing that was really nice. I think a lot of the other wins, for example, big clients and so on, yes, you can celebrate them with your team, but like going home to their family or friends, maybe not as much relevant for them because they just don't know what it means.
It's a really good point. When I talk to my grandma about my business, she doesn't get it. She would love to get it, but she just doesn't. So I just say, yeah, the Facebook's going well, thanks. End of, and that's it. But I like the idea of, it was at that point, that Times article, where all of a sudden your success was spoken about in a language which they understood.
Yeah.
In a medium which they read.
Yeah, exactly that.
Whoa. How did that feel?
For me, it felt good and bad, because I quite like the separation of like work and like personal life, in the sense of, for me, I never liked coming home and reciting everything I'd done throughout the day to my family, to my friends and so on, but purely because I felt like I was reliving the whole day again. I like just to sort of, okay, that's finished now. Now I'm Ben, the teenager. And I think that's still the case now. Like when I'm out with my friends and they ask, oh, how's business? I'm always thinking, oh, okay, yeah, it's going well, thank you. And I try not to get into too far, I think, because I quite like that split, and it helps me, manage my mental health and make sure that I'm not 24/7 just thinking about the same thing. So I think to one side of things, when sort of reality hit for like friends and family, that was negative in a sense of I was now being asked more questions of, oh wow, what does that mean? What does that mean? I'm like, oh, okay. And obviously I'm going to explain it because they mean a lot to me. I'm going to say that. But the other side of it was also, I think sometimes it's nice for them to know that you are doing well, not from a big-headed point of view, but from a point of view of, often they used to worry about me and used to be like, I'm employing a member of staff, and my mum especially would be like, is that safe? Do you know how to do that? Like, because it is a risk, and for someone who's not in that environment, it is a scary thing for them. So I think it had its pros and its cons, but I think obviously the pros was by far the best part. The fact that I think it both made me realise reality of the situation I was in, but also made my family realise that this is actually something legitimate and something that's growing really well.
So I think it was around the exit time, obviously tons of press articles about you. We had Richard Branson calling you one of the most exciting entrepreneurs ever, I think that was the quote. This is, huge stuff, huge press, huge attention. What did that do either for you, or what did that do to you kind of emotionally and mentally?
I'd say, again, pros and cons. You have the amazing part from the business point of view, as I was now meeting some phenomenal leaders, some people who would never normally be able to pitch to in my life, and I could then pitch them our services, and it led to us winning some amazing contracts with brands like Unilever or like the government and so on, who you had to network in to get in front of them, but once we were in, we were able to do a lot of work with them. So I think that was the amazing part. I think for a certain period of time you can get lost in that, and I think I did to a certain point where it was like, oh wow, this event or this is happening, doing this, doing that, and you forget actually you've got a business to run. And I do think there was a line, and I learned the hard way, I'd say, through that time, that if you go too far down one route, your business will suffer. And a lot of people, I think, try to start a business, and then maybe the exciting, the sort of glamorous side of being an entrepreneur takes over, and they just want to be known as the entrepreneur, not actually known as the business they're running and actually providing value to clients and customers and so on. So I think that for maybe 6 months, I probably got lost in that, and I had to pull myself back in to go, hang on, reality is I'm paying for like families to have an income. I've got clients who are responsible for, but there's a more serious situation going on here that needs to be handled properly and professionally. So I think that was in the main thing. But yeah, I'd say the other side of all of that is when it came to meeting all these amazing people, I think that also made me realize that I want to do something else. Made me realize that I could be in the room, for example, at a meeting at like the Palace, and meet these absolutely phenomenal people, and then go back and feel like I'm just doing the same thing for the same people. So I'd say that also was a big driving factor for me to then be okay with doing the exit, saying, actually, you know what, this is something which I want to do, because I want to do more of this ability to make a difference and make a change. And I didn't feel like I was doing that in the marketing company.
So part of what you're touching on there is the excitement of being an entrepreneur and getting swept up in it all. And I remember, and this is way before WOW, when I started my YouTube channel at Cambridge, I was documenting the life of a Cambridge student. I got obsessed with it. And there were some quite uncomfortable moments with that, which were, really close friends of mine essentially having to say to me, like, you're a friend of mine. I'm not just a friend of yours. I've got things that I want to share with you. I've got things that I want your advice on. And you're just speaking about yourself a lot. And it just feels like it's all about you. Now, to hear that from one of your best friends, like, that shit hurts. But on the flip side, that's then, it's meant that now I'm into, my YouTube phase is over. And now I'm, working really hard on WoW. But I've kind of had experiences like that where people close to me in my life have said tough things to me. But I think it's set me on a much better course. I wonder if there was much of that for you.
Yeah, and I think interesting you say that as well, because I think it's the people who say that to you are the people I don't think you value as much at the time. Like when I've had that, and you have felt the same, you get pissed off and you think, oh, yeah, I don't want to hear that. And no, because obviously the situation you're in, that's counter to what you're thinking. So, but I think in reality, those are the best people to have around you. Those who sort of just keep you grounded and keep you who you are. I've definitely got that with my parents, but also been, for example, there's a lady called Alison. I don't know if you've met her, who I've known. I actually met her when I was about 15 years old at these entrepreneur awards. And ever since then, she's been like my business mum, in the sense of she's always been there. If I have a problem with an employee or anything, I'll call her up and be like, come on, Alison, I just need to shout and just vent this out. And then she'll like help me sort of compile it and so on. But the interesting thing about that is she's always been there to be a bit like, come on, mate, I mean, you just posted that online. What does that even mean? What's the reality of that? And so on. So actually, they're just to call me out, and having safe people around you to call you out, I think helps shape you. Because it's in this world where when you are an entrepreneur at such a young age, you haven't got your manager or your boss sitting you down once a week or once every fortnight to say, okay, what are your goals for the next 2 weeks? How can we improve of the last 2 weeks? What's gone wrong? You haven't got that. It's just you and yourself. So having mentors and people around you, and even if they're friends who don't care about the business, but actually are there to protect you as an individual, I actually think is way too overlooked by entrepreneurs.
What you're doing, whether you're doing on your own or with a co-founder, is bloody difficult. And you don't really get praise from many people. There are moments of validation when you get featured in the Times, when you get Young Entrepreneur of the Year, when your business hits a certain revenue milestone. But the ongoing, just getting through it can be really difficult. One of our advisors, Christoph Bettine, who was running Rubik's brand, which owned Rubik's Cube, he turned around to me at one point and he's like, you don't need XYZ, which was a solution I thought I needed to a big problem. You literally just need somebody to tell you you're doing a good job once a week. Yeah. Like, you need that reassurance. And then on the flip side, when it comes to mentoring, I feel like mentoring is spoken about in a way that makes it very simple. You find a mentor, you invest in the relationship, and it lasts for a long time. But then I've spoken to people who've never had a mentor, who don't understand how to make the first move. So, is there any advice you have for those people?
Yeah. On reflection, I realized I've near enough always had mentors to some shape or form. In reality, at the time, I never really called them mentors. They're just people I can call up and go to for help. I think as an entrepreneur, at the same time when the problems are going to hit. That's the point of an entrepreneur. So you then call up these people and go, yeah, something's about to happen. What do I do? A great example of it is I knew from really young age that finance was not an area that I was strong at. Naturally, you're 13, you're not like you're sitting there, you know all about finance and how it all works and so on. But I realized if I want to grow the company, I need to be able to read the financial documents the accountants are making. I need to be able to understand them and make decisions on them. So actually, just through an event, through a local charity in Kent where I grew up, I was then able to meet a guy who used to be a finance director at Apple. Like, phenomenal guy, done it in a real senior position at one of the world's best companies, now retired, who just loves supporting young people. And I met him at this event and I said, look, can we just go for a coffee? I've got some questions I want to ask. That informally then started to become something a bit more significant, in the sense of every month we then start to have this coffee at the same coffee shop, and I'd then come to him and go, oh, here's my financials for the month, what do you think? Or what about this? What about that? I'm thinking about maybe raising investment. And he'd be like, don't do that, you're stupid. Marketing companies, it's very hard, and they're near enough impossible because you're not going to get multipliers. And all of these questions that I then just needed somebody to quickly just shoot me down, and they were like, look, stick to what you're good at. This side of things is not worth it looking at it right now. And I think that saves so much time for me, just having somebody who'd been there and done it and knew the implications of it. And the same happens, for example, I mentioned Alison earlier for sales. Again, someone I met when I was quite young. I remember at the event, I was in like a suit way too big for me, walking around this balcony, unable to drink at the reception because I was underage. And she just came over to me and said, like, what do you do? And from there, we became good friends. But again, for her, being a salesperson, I can then call up at any time, be a bit like, Alison, I'm stuck in this tricky situation right now. The client's saying this, or they're not responding to that. What do I do? And so for me, I feel like mentoring doesn't work well if it's super, super structured, because I think in reality, entrepreneurship isn't structured. That's the whole thing about being an entrepreneur compared to working at a corporate. But I think the principle of having great people around you can call is really valuable.
So are you a mentor to a lot of people?
I am, but again, not in like a let's meet up again in 6 weeks to see how things are progressing. But I am in the sense of like people will send me messages or ask questions and go, look at doing this, what do you think? Do you mind reviewing my pitch decks, one I get all the time at the moment, but like, do you mind reviewing this and I'll give them some advice and make some introductions. So I think yes, but I'm not really a big fan of that sort of structured method again, like I mentioned.
So, still on the topic of mentors, can you think of one particular moment or one particular piece of advice from a particular person that you can share?
I think it's loads of like, I'm trying to think of one standout moment, because I feel like the job of a mentor isn't to tell you what to do. So often it was subconscious messaging that would then drive me to make decisions compared to saying, stop what you do and do this. Although actually, I think one thing, reality that happened for me was when I was sitting down with one of my mentors, he was actually a bit more involved. He was actually sort of really supporting on the company and so on. And someone used to do websites. And he sat me down and was like, right, come on. And his exact words were, website development companies are like fish and chip shops on every corner of every road. And he said, if you really want to stand out and grow something, you need to differentiate yourself. And I think we always think about USPs and that sort of thing. And now in reality, it's very hard to get a USP in the marketing world, as you'll know. Like you can talk about USP and how you're different, but in reality, it's a service and it's hard to really have a pinpoint USP. But what he did say was, this is at the time when brands were desperate to get on social media, when even our own clients were like, you built us a website, but now what? People aren't visiting our site, they're not buying and things. So they said, what can you do to increase traffic? And naturally you think SEO, but at this point, this is now moving more to like social marketing. And then there was these brands who were like, we want to reach young people and the kids are on social media, so how do we get in front of them? And that, like him sitting me down and being like, come on, you've got an opportunity here, grab it. That then massively changed the company from going from maybe building websites for like little SMEs to now being able to do marketing campaigns for larger companies, bigger budgets, bigger time spans, so you could really get sort of your teeth into it. And then able to, I think from that, recruit into that team, because naturally I was like, this is a new complete sector, I can learn about it, but I need people who have done it before. But also then actually sort of have a key differentiator, which was, if you want to reach young people, go to an agency run by a young person.
Nice. I love that. So I want to talk about Tahora. I want to talk about all the success you've achieved so far and some of the challenges as well. Before we do, I would love to understand what it felt like to have this huge success so early on under your belt, and then to start a new business, to start raising funds, start hiring people and so on. Because the first thing I would think was, geez, that must be a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I'd say it was a weird moment actually. So after leaving the marketing company, did like 6 months at this new agency and then left. And in that period, after that 6 months, I remember I went on probably my first holiday, apart from like really young as a child, where I didn't bring my laptop. I went to Thailand, and it was just me, a random group of people that I got put together by one of our clients, and just went there. Basically just had 2 weeks, running around the beaches, partying, just basically catching up in the sense of a lot of the things I've missed. But also that moment, I remember sitting on the beach thinking, what now? I haven't got a plan. And my whole life until that point, I'd had a plan to a certain extent. Apart from I was 11, building websites, okay, 13, there was a plan, business, growing it. And I always had something that's going on. This point, there wasn't. This point, it was like, and off we go again. So at the same time, I was doing a lot of like conference speaking. Did a show on TV, which was like Kids Dragons Day and called Pocket Money Pitch. So doing like random things like that. But then I didn't have this master plan that I felt like I had. So then spent a bit of time just doing consultancy, doing some odd jobs, doing a bit of work for my old clients and so on. Just sort of not pressurizing myself, but I think, like you mentioned, there's this reality that is, if you've been successful, and even if the media have hyped up that success even more, if you've got that, then there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders for the next thing to be good. And I'll probably use an example which is probably even easier for us to think about. If you think about someone like, and it's not me comparing him to him, but just as an anecdote here, someone like Elon Musk, and when he starts a new company, or Branson, when he starts a new company, you naturally like that company's going to do well. Now, I'm in no way comparing myself to that, but I think there's still a resemblance of, if people saw your last company was successful, they expect your next one to be as successful or more. So there is that pressure, and I definitely felt that. So I then didn't really rush. I was doing a lot of speaking, then did some consultancy at GlaxoSmithKline, so GSK. And my work there was, I was a comms director, and I was focused on sort of their merger with Pfizer and how that all came together for the internal change programs. That was like my first time in corporate world. I had thousands of colleagues. I had a desk in a very large corporate office. It was such a different environment. I had an ID pass to get in. All the little things, but it was very much a first thing for me. And whilst I was there, I think that was when I realized I really want to do something now that makes a difference. And for me, making a difference was actually around like mental health. And that actually came had one of my best friends, but also had my sibling going through some really bad mental health challenges. And I was there supporting both of them, and just realizing, you know what I've seen, been through and supported them with, it touched my heart so much. I was like, I had to do something to address this. I can't just continue doing our job consulting or events and so on. There's an underlying need that needs to be addressed. But then I was like, you know what? How can I address something which thousands, if not more, hundreds of thousands of scientists and doctors around the world are trying to address, and so on. So it got me into a situation where, like, hang on a minute, Ben, reality check. You may think you can do a good job, but people can do it better. And then I actually read this book by Johann Hari called Lost Connections. And what it basically talks about is this unspoken world of mental health, which is disconnection. It's in a sense what social media has probably really created. Social media has created us to be connected, but we're more disconnected than ever before. And it's a reality that one of the leading causes of mental health challenges is social isolation, lack of belonging. But interestingly, alongside that, there's also this amplifier, this thing that, and it could be something else, it could be due to financial challenges, whatever it might be. But if you don't feel like you belong and feel like you have great community around you, you're going to struggle even more to get through that. And so that then got me really thinking, hang on a minute, there's a problem here. And that's basically how Tahora started. So Tahora is actually a Maori name, so it's from New Zealand, and it means together in health. And that came from, I was out there literally 2 years ago, near enough today, just before sort of COVID really hit. And when I was there, I remember going to a real sort of rural Maori community, and community for them is much different to maybe how we see community in London or in the UK. Community really meant like a bring and share lunch, because we were coming to visit their town village and a village hall. And community was really about, we are one and we all come together. One person brought a fish that he literally caught that day. Another person made some other things that they brought. It's this real bare reality that everyone contributes. And we've lost that. We've definitely lost that. And so the link between that and that mental health is apparent. So that then is basically how Tahora started. So although we do have like a mental health at our heart focus, in reality we're about, if we can make great connections between people, we're now going to see people both enjoy their time at work, because it's in a workplace setting, but also we're going to see those people feel like they're better connected. And should something arise, they want support, they've now got friends at work they can speak to, and not just colleagues.
So I really like the backstory. I love the mission, where the name comes from. And that's all the kind of softer kind of mission, vision, brand piece. What is the harder, tangible stuff? What does the app actually do in terms of community? How does it bring people together? And also, was the focus on bigger businesses and I think corporates? Was that a kind of strategic business decision? Because ultimately, you can build a business that has an impact, but the business has got to be able to sustain itself and be a business.
So there's this analogy that when you're growing a company, when you get to about 100 to 150 employees, reality is the employees know each other to a certain extent. So maybe that belonging and a connection isn't as much of a problem. But then as you start to scale and go into like medium enterprises to corporates, then it becomes this idea of a small fish in a big pond. So that's really where Tahora tackles. So we're a mobile app. When you onboard onto the app, we ask for your interests, where you are. We don't care about your house or anything like that, but we care about, what town or village or city are you in. And then we help you connect with others who also love the same things as you in the same area. All those who are also in the office today who also love those things. And then the final part and sort of piece to that is then experiences. So really then how do you bring that to life by getting you together? If you all really want to get into rock climbing, then Tahora will bring you together and help you organize your rock climbing experience with your colleagues one evening. Now these people, the beauty behind it is these people you probably never met before, because you could work in marketing, they could work in accounts, someone else could work in sales, someone else could work in facilities, but you've all got a love for rock climbing, you've all come together, you've all gone and done this taster session for an hour, and you've now got a chance to really know that person from a personal level. Some people go, brilliant, have fun, and that's it. But a vast majority of people then take that experience and really form it into a relationship. By relationship, I'm not meaning like a love relationship, but a relationship in the sense of it's a community, but we look after each other, we continue that conversation.
I think it's really, really cool. So from a commercial point of view, what is the key kind of USP for, is it the head of wellbeing at a corporate that would bring you guys in? Is this a wellbeing initiative? Is this an engagement and retention initiative? Is this something else?
So I'd say more engagement. So normally we'd sell to the people experience, HR culture side of things. Sometimes culture falls under the CEO as well, depending on the company, but less of wellbeing, because wellbeing is typically more ROI is focused on, how are we supporting people's needs at that time, which could be something very apparent like financial well-being or whatever it might be. So that is a lot more structured. So we don't really get involved in the pure play well-being. We do make well-being communities on the app, but we don't really offer like the medical support or the advice or the guidance for that. So for us, we're a culture platform. Typically more recently, actually more facilities platform as well people are looking at. So now back to work and hybrids becoming the norm. How do you create, and I hate the word, but this water cooler conversations, but in a more structured way when not everyone's in the room together. So that's more how this conversation is driving. The commercial model for us is we then charge the workplace per employee per month who uses the platform. So we're not in the arrangement of like massive contracts to sign up the whole workforce and then if only 10 sign up, that's it. I think that's also because some people, they want to do their 9 to 5 and they don't want to have that connection and so on. And that's fine. We're never going to charge the corporate for that.
So where is Tahora now? If you had to give a highlight reel, what would you say?
So I'd say we've gone through the experimenting phase and we've now got some serious enterprises using the platform. Companies like, Google, companies like NatWest Bank, the RSPCA, some other banks and organizations across the world as well. So I think we've gone through that like baby phase. We've had that experimenting of that first year. We're now 2 years old as a company. And for the last year, we've really hit that, say, maturity where we're now starting to see corporates sign up. We're seeing corporates come to us and say, we need to invest in this. Company-wise, so we've raised probably in total now about $1.5 million. I say dollars because you've also got accepted into something called Y Combinator, and Y Combinator is seen as probably one of the best tech accelerators over in San Francisco. It's this place where some of the best entrepreneurs and tech companies come together to grow and then to raise investment and so on at the end. So by doing that, we became a US company, and we've actually literally just gone through the final stages of doing that, which I think has also opened up a lot of opportunities over maybe the other side of the pond in the US market, where you get companies who are much bigger, but also when companies are bigger, you also get more loneliness, more disconnection.
That's really interesting. And also, Y Combinator is the Harvard of accelerators. It is known as the best. They've, who's it? Dropbox has been through there. Airbnb has been through there. So many brilliant, huge companies. So just even the association with Y Combinator is massive. And then obviously you have the tangible, real learnings and network that you take away. So that's wild. So congrats on that. I would love to talk about all things culture, all things leadership, management, particularly through the lens of being a young founder, because I'm 25 now. I started WOW when I was 21. And in the last, I think around just over 12 months, we essentially tripled in headcount. So I'm now having to navigate, first of all, how do I work with people younger than me, my age and older? How do I work with people who I really like, they're cool people, they're interesting people, they bring something to the table. And something that I've struggled with throughout is, when there are people who are similar to the friends that I would see on the weekend, it's bloody difficult to give like direct feedback. And it can be difficult to say, hey, that's not how we do things here. I wasn't pleased about that. So I would love to understand that from your perspective.
Yeah, I'd say the feedback thing's always been quite interesting, because there'll be times that I'll like go home and I'll be like, why are they doing that? What is going on? And I'll get really frustrated. And then I'll come to work and I'll have a catch up and it'll be like, oh, could improve there. And I think there's actually this reality check I had to myself of being a bit like, if that's not done properly, who does it affect? Affects them in the sense they might have to get a new job, but think about like a business. How does it affect the business? It could literally shut the whole thing down if it becomes such a big problem and really grows and grows. So I think that reality check of me realizing, hang on a minute, this needs to be stopped. Right now in Tahora, this is my first company where it's investment backed. There are, at the moment, only angels and Y Combinator. So you've got all these individuals and a fund who have got money in this. And that money is family money. That money is hard-earned cash they spent years of their life putting into this thing. That is that Y Combinator, their money has come from other entrepreneurs who've done really well, who then put money back into their fund and invest in the next wave. And money doesn't just grow on trees. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why I say that is because I then had this reality check of being a bit like, come on, Ben, you have a responsibility here. I'm acting in a sense on behalf of my investors to a certain point of view, not from like a day-to-day, but in a sense of the cash that is funding this right now has come from their pockets, not mine.
Yep.
Which therefore means that I need to make sure that I am like shepherding that and making sure that it's put into the right pockets and in the right way, and it's being spent wisely and not just wasted on random things, or people are spending a week doing something that's not needed. So I think that reality check maybe changed my bit about it. And you do have to sometimes be careful, because sometimes as an entrepreneur, what you're thinking and what you can say are different, and you have to like really think about how you structure that and bring it together. But I also think that's something that you just learn over time. I know I'm not a perfect boss, and I would never claim I am. I think I'm also 23. Like, it's not like I've sat here and said, for the last 25 years when I've been doing managerial roles and X, Y, and Z, I've learned this. Every day is learning something new. But I think as long as you've got that mindset of you are learning, that's also okay. But I think there's some people I know who maybe of our sort of age who don't think like that. You think like, no, I am the best and what I say goes. That's when you start to see struggle, because that's where the reality hits in. Maybe they haven't been through that before. They don't know what that experience actually means. Then they can't handle that situation.
Yeah, I think the point on you having a wider responsibility to a number of shareholders, individuals, families is a really good one. And, if I were in that situation and that was in the back of my mind, I wouldn't feel like I was necessarily personally doing this. I'd feel like, I got responsibility and this needs to be done and I'm the guy to do it. Mm-hmm. So I definitely hear how that can be helpful. What I've found in the past, way back when I started a business, I was savage. It was awful. I gave horrible feedback. There was no mention of the good things. If they were good, they just happened. I didn't comment. If they were bad, I mentioned it straight away. The way that I mentioned it, the tone of my voice, everything about it was awful. And thank God I got some feedback from my colleagues. And then I went gradually the extreme opposite to the point where now I think I'm a massive softie. And I've had feedback from colleagues, a few months ago to say, hey, you can be a bit stronger, you can be a bit firmer here, because you need to say these things, and we get that.
Yeah.
So now I'm in the process of figuring out what that looks like. But I realized recently that a lot of the time in the past, I have wimped out. I've thought, okay, I've got a great relationship with this person. I really like them. They're doing a great job. But at the same time, something isn't right. And it's quite clear to me that these things need a big improvement. So what I would do is I would go in with the super soft, hey, here's what's going really well. There's this thing we can work on a little bit. But yeah, great stuff. And I would leave there feeling as if, I'd said the whole thing. The reality was I'd said 90% of what I wanted to say. That remaining 10% would be the difficult stuff to say.
Yeah.
That's the stuff which I would feel uncomfortable talking about. That's the stuff, that someone would, it would be difficult for them to hear. And I realize now that on reflection, I'm not doing anyone any favors. It's like what you said, like who's actually impacted by this? The people on our team are ambitious. They want to level up. They want to grow within a company. They want to grow professionally. And I'm not helping them if I'm just like, okay, I'm going to wimp out here because it's difficult for me to say. So that's kind of my thinking going forward and how I'm going to approach things. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I'm going to be savage with the delivery of feedback, but it does mean that I'm going to remove how I feel. If I think, that's going to be tough for them to hear, I'm going to remove myself and my interests from it and be the guy who gives the feedback to other people that's actually going to help them. Mm-hmm. But it's taken me a while to get to this point.
I think the other thing that I've started doing that I think reinforces it and sometimes puts it a bit more blunt than maybe you'd say it in the actual catch-up is so every employee has like a Notion page on our system, and they on that they put in their to-dos, any notes. It's their little universe. Mm-hmm. Mike, my co-founder, and I both have access to those because we can add in notes and sort of just see how things are going and so on. At the same time, we then have a catch-up section in that. And I'll put in the notes from the catch-up into their thing so they can see it, we can see it, not hidden behind some HR platform of what was said, but actually it was transparent. They can see the notes and they can align on that. They can make edits if they think they weren't true representation of what was said. But I also found that sometimes hits the reality when you say, here are the 3 good things and here are the 3 things you need to improve on. When they're in that blunt form, without the sugarcoating, without the sit down, without the coffee in your hand, just in the, here's what it is. Gives you time to digest, but it's not like you're sending it before the meeting because then that's gonna be like, whoa, hang on a minute. So you send it after, and it's everything in there is things that were discussed, but sometimes having that secondary layer I found just enforces it, and it also makes it easier to bring it up 2 weeks later. Like these 3 things, that one you've done, these other 2 I haven't seen any improvement in. There's no then, I forgot, or I didn't realize what we said about that because actually that's here. And I almost think that one of the things I've worked out or learned when it comes to managing people as a young person is I think sometimes people think they can pull the wool over your eyes or think that your inexperience can make it easier for them. And now I'm not saying this about any of our current Tahora employees or anything like that. I actually think we've got a really good group of people who actually really respect that. Both me, but also Mike, so he's 30. So also realise that both of us being young people in the grand scheme of things, they actually really respect that. And I think I'd be fair to say they love the fact that it brings new ideas and a new approach to things. But I have in the past seen experiences where sometimes a young person naturally means if I want to get something I want, I can achieve that, or I can use them or manipulate the situation to get what I want. And so that I had to learn the hard way. I had to realize that. And that basically came from people close to me saying, why are you letting them do that? What on earth is going on? And that's where I think I had this reality check of I'm responsible right now to investors, like I say, but even when I had a marketing company and the same with yourself, is you're responsible to your clients. Your clients are paying your bills. Your clients are paying for X number of hours for you to deliver a service. And if you feel like you're mucking around in those hours, that only reflects badly on one person. And unfortunately, it's the entrepreneur, the business leader who's had that relationship, who's managing that, because that's the person they go to when they want to end things, not the employee who's maybe behind the scenes, not on that sort of call once a week. So I think that reality made me realize I have to find a group of people, a group of employees who know that I'm young and know that. So it's on our recruitment page, it's public. It's not like I'm hiding the fact that you're going to have a young leader, but at the same time see the positives and the value they get from that.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. One thing really stands out, which is having the conversation, having a difficult conversation, and then following up in just a matter of fact way, and also having that in one universe, you called it, so having it on Notion so it's consistently there. I think particularly what we're seeing is as we grow, particularly as we grow quickly, ways of doing things, processes get lost, and you as the boss need to be the one to set the tone. We consistently document these things, we document these conversations, we then follow back on them. And I think doing that, not only helps you address the matter at hand, but then helps that kind of culture and that way of working filter throughout the company. The final kind of thought I have on feedback is the ability to kind of welcome feedback yourself. I had a colleague recently send me a message and say, look, hey, I get that you're really busy, but I wanted to let you know that on that call we just had, it felt like you were really disengaged, and it felt like you were doing other things. So just wanted to kind of leave that with you. And I saw that and I was like, first of all, like, fuck, this is cool. Like, this is cool that someone who I work with is saying this to me.
Yeah.
The other part was, oh shit. What about the other person on the call who I was not being engaged with? But then also the real piece of this, which is, what about the 20 plus other calls I had this week? Because what I was doing, right, I'm, trying to manage a bunch of stuff. So I will, jump off camera, or I'll open up another tab and quickly make a note about something.
You'll see the flash of your screen will change, and you see
the whole thing. And so I've been doing this, particularly recently, a lot. I would have continued doing that a lot. And all it is, it's super simple. Somebody says to me, who's on my team, who I trust, hey, you did this thing, it's not great, just so you know. Boom, best thing ever. And so I've really tried to kind of encourage that. When those things happen, I share it with the team. So I think, again, that sets a tone for how we give feedback to each other and how we can learn from it. I want to talk about legacy, which kind of sounds a bit odd because, legacy is super long term. I'm 25, you're 23. But, the podcast is called Stamp Your Mark. It's about leaving a mark on the world. So what is that for you? What is the reputation, the mark, and the ultimate legacy that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, I'd say for me, first starting the company, the challenges I went through were often like part of a world which is unheard of. You get the reality of a young person starting a company, there's trust issues, there's leadership problems with that part, and I think that's known to the world. But like, for me, there are also other challenges like having a business bank account whilst under the age of 18, or trying to like grow a company whilst at school. And I almost, when I was starting, I sound really old saying this, when I was like starting Tahora Design, it was before like YouTubers really started to make, real lot of money, and it started to become a real big thing. It was at the time that's booming, but it wasn't like clear names you could mention of like the big people. What I think that meant was me leaving a legacy. A lot of the challenges I was going through were quite new for a young person joining the tech sort of online world. And it was reality that, you can't get a bank account whilst under the age of 18. To run a company whilst at school is extremely hard. You're doing it in the evenings and on your computer till late at night. And so I really tried to make it my mission both to obviously do it for myself and to grow in the company, but also to make it easier for other people by almost documenting that, talking about that, but also like the business banking situation. I mean, I literally had to change the law to make that possible, and I became the first ever person to get a business bank account whilst at the age of 18. Now that came from me lobbying the government, lobbying the banks, and getting that to change. Now in reality, did that affect me loads? Not really, because by the time I got through the whole process, it was about a month before I turned 18. But what it did do is it did mean that now other under 18s can go and apply and get a business bank account if they want to. So it basically unlocked that. So for me, that's like the early stage of legacy that I'm proud of. This fact that hopefully, even if it's just that one thing, another young person who, even if it's just starting doing content online from a young age, they're still a business, but now they can hopefully start things off much easier and quicker and so on. I think that's that from one point of view. In Tahora now, the legacy that for me is so important is that emotional legacy, which is everyone that the business has touched, whether it be employees, whether that be customers, whether it be stakeholders, or even investors. They felt like they belonged, they felt like they had a family, they felt like they were part of something. And I think that sounds so like cliche saying it, but in reality, the whole product we're doing is the fact that you can work in a corporate and wear a suit every day or have to put on an image, but that's not who you are. Who you are is this X, Y, and Z person who loves these, does that, identifies in that way, and whatever it might be. And we celebrate that. And if people emotionally felt like they're valued, that for me is the legacy that Tahora is definitely trying to create.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. That is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.